All right, before we start off with last week's Futato exercises, I want to discuss something that I got a question about, and that's recognizing imperatives and jussives and kind of the differences between them. So, looking at the volitives, obviously, the imperative is we don't want to just think of it as command. What we mean by volitive is it expresses will. It expresses what someone wants or desires. So imperative does that in the second person. So when you say listen, you are expressing your desire to the person you're speaking with, your desire regarding that person. So your desire regarding that person in listen is you are expressing that you desire that the person you're speaking to would listen. In the cohortative, you're expressing your desire regarding yourself to the person that you're speaking with. So this is first person. When you say let me listen or may I listen or something like that, listen isn't a great one. May I live or may I survive or something like that. You are expressing your desire for yourself, first person desire, what you desire for yourself to the person you're speaking with. This is always in these volitives. You are expressing a desire that you have to the person you're speaking with. In the first person, you're expressing a desire you have for yourself. In the second person, you're expressing a desire you have for the person you're speaking with. And in the jussive, you're expressing a desire with regards to a third party to the person you're speaking with. So the thing that changes with each of these persons is not who's speaking and not to whom that person is speaking, but who the desire is about. So in the cohortative, the desire is about the speaker, the first person. In the imperative, the desire is about the addressee, the second person. And in the jussive, the desire is about a third party. So neither the speaker nor the addressee, but some third party. All right, so that's the meaning idea behind the volitives. And so cohortative expresses will or desire for or with regards to the speaker. Imperative expresses will or desire with regards to the addressee. And jussive expresses will or desire with regards to a third party. Cohortative is pretty easy to recognize. It's basically the first person form, either singular or plural, plus a comates hay suffix. And that's going to affect the vocalization at times. It's going to affect the vowels at times, but it's pretty easy to recognize the aleph or noon prefix with a comates hay suffix. The imperative is going to look very, very, very similar to the infinitive construct. So how are you going to tell the difference? Well, in the 2ms form, it's going to be difficult a lot of the time. In the 2ms form, the imperative is often going to look identical to the infinitive construct. All right, so the example here, katol. Katol in the infinitive construct looks identical to katol in the 2ms. Now, as you move to the 2fs, we now start adding suffixes because the infinitive construct is just based on the 3ms form of the imperfect, which has no suffix. Well, the imperative is based on the 2ms form of the imperfect, which also has no suffix. But then when we go into the 2fs imperative, that's based on the 2fs form of the imperfect, and that has the hirik yod suffix, tiktali. When we want the 2mp imperative, we base that on the 2mp form of the imperfect, tiktalu, and then we just take off the prefix, ktlu. Of course, when we're left with ktlu, this 2 these two shavas at the beginning of a word, that first shava is going to become a hirig. So we get kitlu. And then finally, the 2FP form of the imperative, that's based on the 2FP form of the imperfect, tiktolna. We take off the t prefix and we get katolna. And so that's what we have here, katolna. So the only time you're going to have trouble distinguishing between the infinitive construct and the imperative is when the imperative is in the 2MS form. But even here, in the weak verbs, sometimes the imperative will also be distinct. And one of the reasons for that is that the infinitive has a stronger desire for an O-class theme vowel than the imperative does. Some examples. Well, here's an example. Batach, the cow perfect 3MS form batach, in the imperfect, the 2MS becomes tivtach. Right? Not tivtoch, tivtach. The reason for the batach is because you've got a third guttural, and that guttural really wants an A-class vowel. So the imperative form is just the imperfect form minus the prefix. So instead of tivtach, we get batach. The infinitive construct would be different because the infinitive construct has a strong preference for an O-class theme vowel. And so what happens in the infinitive construct in a word like batach, where we get this A-class theme vowel, is we get a little bit of a tug-of-war, and this A-class theme vowel basically shifts to a furtive patach to make room for the holum theme vowel. So the infinitive construct form of batach would be batoach. You would have batoach. You'd have both vowels there. So there are times when the imperative 2MS is distinguishable from the infinitive construct, but those often happen in the weak verbs, and they often happen in a situation where you have either a furtive patach in the infinitive construct, or like your third hey, your third hey verbs, those are also going to look a little bit different. So generally speaking, the imperative 2MS looks the same as the infinitive construct. All right. When it comes to the jussive, how do you recognize the jussive? Well, often there is no difference in the form of a jussive and the imperfect. They are often identical in form. So, how do you tell the difference? Well, it's going to have to come down to function if the two forms are identical. Now, there are times when the forms are not identical. For example, in the third hey verbs, you get a shortened form. So whereas the imperfect would be yigle, jussive is going to drop that hey, and actually the segel of the segel hey is going to come into the next available vowel spot. So instead of yigle, you get yiggle. And it's actually accented on this first syllable as well. Basically, the reason for this is the jussive pulls the accent back a syllable. So yigle, we would be accented on the final syllable, obviously. But in the jussive, we lose this third hey, and we pull the accent mark back a syllable, and so we get yigel. Now, a couple other places where you're going to notice a difference. We haven't gotten here yet, but next chapter, actually, did we start that yet this week? Let's take a look here. I think this was just review. Yeah. So next week we'll get into the hollow verbs. Hollow verbs are verbs that have a vowel letter as the R2 letter. In hollow verbs, you also get a shortened form in the jussive, so you'll be able to tell a difference there. And that next chapter will go into more what that looks like. And then finally, when we get into the Hiphil stem or the Hiphil pattern, there will also be indications of difference between the jussive and the imperfect. But for now, you should really think of the imperfect and the jussive as identical in form in the strong verb. That is going to obviously present a challenge when you're trying to figure out, is this jussive or is this imperfect? I would go with jussive unless there's a good reason from context to indicate. I'm sorry, I would go with imperfect unless there's a good reason from context to indicate that it is jussive. Remember, jussive is the third person volitive. So in order to call it jussive, you need to be picking up from context some sort of expression of will or desire. So, let's look at okay. Not really many great examples there. So let's just go to our assignment to look at kind of practice examples. All right, so I will start with B so that we can get some translation going here. Well, there's not really context here. Let's go to C and we'll look at some context. Number 4 is going to be the best one to look at. So here we've got Ya'al. Of course, this is a situation where there is a morphological difference. Ya'al, this is from Allah, which is a third hey, so you do see a difference here. But what essentially happens, you know what, honestly, let's... Okay, let's go with number 3. Or I'm sorry, number 4 here. Nope, not number 4. Trying to translate through these. Man, we're really not getting any great examples here. Okay. I wish in his lesson he would give you more examples. I guess this is all we get. So let's just work with these. No. These all reflect a difference. So instead what we're going to do is we're just going to take, let's say, Malach, to rule or to reign as king. Or to reign or to rule as king. So let's say we have Malach. Let me get a Word document going here. All right. All right, so let's say we have a word like Yim Loch Ke. trying to remember how to spell the word for three. I don't think that's right, but let's just take a look here. Shalosh, not shalosh. No, I'm not sure if shana is plural or not, or feminine or not. We'll just go with that. All right, so here we've got Yimloch, Kimelech, Shalosh Shanot. Here, Shalosh Shanot is functioning as an adverbial accusative, modifying Yimloch. Yimloch is it looks like a Cal imperfect 3ms form of Malach, but it could be a Cal jussive 3ms form of Malach, because those two forms would be identical. How would the meaning change if it were imperfect versus jussive? Imperfect, we're usually going to translate this with a future time in English. So, he shall rule as king 3 years. That's the imperfect. It's what we call indicative. It's basically just stating a fact, or stating something as a fact, as reality, rather than expressing any sort of desire. If this were jussive, it would mean, may he reign, or let him reign. But I desire that he reign. Again, my desire is in regards to him. May he reign as king 3 years. So the difference here is he will reign as king 3 years versus may he reign as king 3 years. The difference between the imperfect and the jussive is that the imperfect, the imperfect states factual information, or information presented as fact. It indicates something with regard to reality. Whereas the jussive expresses desire. May he reign 3 years. Okay. So how do I know which one it is? Well, in this one sentence, it could be either one. But you have to ask yourself in context, is there a reason to think that this is expressing desire about something, or is this stating information? And the answer to that question will tell you how it's functioning, either as jussive or indicative, because there's no way to tell the difference here. It's very similar to how when we get, instead of Yemlok, say we're looking at Temlok. Alright, so Temlok would either be she will reign or you, sir, will reign. But the problem is the form is identical either way, whether it's 3FS or 2MS. So we need context to help us decide. Well, sometimes context could mean either one. In that case, the 2MS form of the verb is much more frequent and common than the 3FS form. So I usually default to 2MS, but that's not necessary. It could just as easily be 3FS. It's just there's no context to help us decide. Well, here, the imperfect is much more frequent than the jussive in this situation. And so I would probably default to imperfect because it's just more frequent. But there's nothing that says this couldn't be jussive. So you want to try to find support from context, but if there is no support from context, it's probably good to note that it could be either one. You need to be open to that. You need to be open to the fact that this could be jussive or it could be imperfect. So the only way to recognize morphologically, as far as spelling goes, is when you're dealing with a third hay verb, in which case it's going to drop the segel hay at the end, or if you're dealing with hollow verbs, which we'll learn about next week, or if you're dealing with a hifil pattern, which we'll learn about later on in the semester. So other than that, they're going to look identical. There's not really a way to tell. Sort of the way that the imperative 2ms is going to often look identical to the infinitive construct. For many, many verbs, they'll be identical. There are some verbs where you can tell a difference. But when they are identical, context is really the key. And if you can translate those sentences both ways, translate it as if you have an infinitive construct, and then translate it as if it's an imperative and hear the difference and see which one makes more sense, the same way here. Translate this both ways. Translate it as imperfect and then translate it as jussive and see which one makes more sense to you. All right? So that was the question that I had to kind of start off here on imperatives and jussives, how to recognize them. Let's go ahead and work our way through these exercises now and see what we find. We're in 24. I'll make this bigger here. All right. So number 1, we've pretty clearly got an aleph prefix here. This is going to be in the imperfect family at least. But we've got the kametz hey suffix at the end. We take all those off, we get shafat. Shafat is our root. The aleph prefix tells us this is 1 CS. And then the kametz hey suffix with the aleph tells us this is cohortative. So you've got a cal cohortative 1 CS form of shafat. Number 2, here we've got a hirik in R1. Zion is never used as a prefix, so it's perfectly reasonable to see Zion here as our R1 root letter. And it's got a hirik. Well, the only time we get a hirik in R1, well, frankly, we haven't even come to that yet. In the PL perfect, we get that. Of course, then we would have a dagesh in the bait. Again, we haven't seen this yet, so that still couldn't be the case. But since we haven't had that yet, we've got to have some other explanation for why we have a hirik here. You'll remember that when we have 2 shavas back to back at the front of a word, the first one shifts to hirik. So we need to see this hirik as a former shava. When R1 has a shava, we need to start thinking along the lines of, there's a couple times that might happen. 1, in the cal perfect, the heavy suffixes, the 2MP and the 2FP, the tem and the ten suffixes, the weight is pulled here and we go with the propretonic reduction is what we get. But in that case, we don't have a dagesh in R2, or not dagesh, we don't have a shava in R2. Furthermore, we're missing the tem and ten suffix here. So our only other option is going to be infinitive construct or imperative. Now, infinitive construct is not going to use a shurik. So anytime you're between infinitive construct and imperative, if you see a shurik there, that is for sure going to be an imperative 2MP. That shurik is the suffix for the 2MP form. So zivhu is going to be a cal imperative 2MP form of zavach. Number 3, we have yivin. Now, you might just look at this and just ask yourself, how many letters is a Hebrew verb supposed to have in its root? 3. How many do I have? 3. Okay, great. I have what I need. Well, hold up. We've got that situation again where we've got a hirik in what presumably is R1. Well, Yod does often function as a prefix letter. And Hiric in the prefix is a great indication that we have a cal in the imperfect family. So if this is a prefix, we're left with bait and noon. Well, what have we lost? If we've lost something off the beginning, like a yod or a noon, we're going to expect for the yod a sere prefix vowel, and for the noon, we're going to expect assimilation into this next letter. We don't have either of those. Now, if we're missing something in the middle, well, we'll get to that next week in hollow verbs, so we'll just skip over that for now. If we're missing something on the end, it's almost certainly a third hay verb. All right, well, third hay works because if we put a hay in there, we get bana, and that is a third hay verb that we're familiar with. So when does the third hay verb drop its third hay without a suffix? Well, really, pretty much the only time is when you've got a cal jussive. I shouldn't say cal jussive, I mean a jussive in general. All right, so if you've got a jussive, a third hay is going to go ahead and drop that third hay. And the segel of the segel hay will show up in the R1 letters. So this is a cal jussive 3ms form. We know it's 3ms because yod indicates third person masculine, and we have no suffix to indicate plural. So it's 3ms of bana. Number 4 is a little bit tricky. How many letters is a Hebrew root supposed to have? 3. How many do I have? 2. Okay, so what am I missing? Am I missing something from the beginning? Or I'm sorry, something on the end. If I am, it would be a hay. And shava with a hay here. This is not a verb that I've run into before. That doesn't mean the verb doesn't exist, so I'll go to my lexicon. And since this is a very limited lexicon, let me even go to my exhaustive lexicon and let me type in shin bait hay. Oh, well, hey, look at that. Okay. So I guess it does exist as a verb. This is to deport. Good to know. All right. So can we make sense of it then? Because, I mean, if we've lost the hay, how do we account for the fact that we've lost a hay? When does that hay drop off? Well, I guess in the infinitive construct the hay would drop off, but it would be replaced by a whole vav tav. In the imperative, I'm pretty sure we get a sere hay in the imperative. I'll have to look into that. But we've also lost our prefix here. So it's not infinitive construct of a third hay. It's not imperative of a third hay. It's not infinitive absolute of a third hay. But we don't have a prefix either. So it can't be adjussive. What are we left with? Well, those are really our only options if what we're missing is a hay. So maybe we're not missing a hay. Maybe we're missing something in the middle. Well, we're not yet because we don't get to that until lesson 25. So what are we missing from the beginning? It must be from the beginning. It could be a noon. It could be a yod. Often, if it's a noon, you'll see assimilation in the next letter, but that's usually when we have a prefix, and we don't have a prefix here. So who's to say it couldn't be a noon? Now, if you go look up nasav, or nashav, I guess, I do not think you're going to find, oh boy. Apparently it is a root, so nashav is to blow. So maybe this is to blow. When are we going to lose this noon? Well, it's in the process of making an infinitive or an imperative. But neither of those make sense because in those cases we expect to see a holum theme vowel. And we don't have that for the infinitive or for the, let's see if we can get an infinitive here. Nope, it's just not a very common one, so. Yeah. So Nashav doesn't really work either, because if this were an infinitive construct or an infinitive absolute or an imperative of Nashav, we wouldn't have a sere here, we'd have a holum. Well, the only other option is that what we're missing is a yod. And if it's a yod that we're missing, then a one yod vav is going to go sere sere. So sere prefix, sere R1. Now, in the infinitive construct, we're still going to have that preference for the would we still have, I think in the one yod vav we actually do lose the preference. So I think this could be an infinitive construct of a one yod vav, but it can certainly be an imperative 2ms of a one yod vav. So what I'm going to say here is that we've got a cal, either a cal infinitive construct of yeshav or a cal imperative 2ms form of yeshav. Let's see what Futato says we have. Okay, he's saying it's imperative instead of infinitive construct. I want to see what yeshav would be in the infinitive construct. So let's just do instead. Let's do this. We'll go. We're going to look for a verb in the cal, and we want it to be an infinitive construct, and we will search. Uh-oh. There we go. Okay, so
You are currently the only person in this conference.
Yoshev is a part of, so these are what? Yeshvu. These are not, oh, it got marked off. Let me try that again. Oops. At, verb, cal, infinitive construct. There we go. Oh, silly me. Silly me. I forgot. Okay, so Yeshav,
person in this conference.
Yeshav in the infinitive construct has the segel segel tav pattern. That's right. I don't know why I forgot that. Okay. So this cannot be infinitive construct because we would expect to see a segel segel tav there. All right. Perfect. I see Jeremy has joined us. Jeremy, I apologize, but the first 20 minutes of this conference, I was going over the question you sent me about recognizing jussive versus imperfect and imperative and all that stuff. So once this is posted, you'll have that explanation there. But basically, just in summary fashion, the only way to tell the difference between an between an imperfect and a jussive in the strong verb is by the meaning, by context, because they will look identical. The only time the jussive is going to look different from the imperfect is when you have a third hey verb, or next week we'll see when you get into the hollow verbs, that will have a shortened form in the jussive. And then when we get into the hifil stem or the hifil pattern, that will have a shortened form in the jussive as well. So basically, the difference between the jussive and the imperfect in most verbs comes down to context. As far as the meaning goes, what is the difference in meaning? Imperfect usually is what we would consider an indicative mood. It's presenting information as factual. So the example that I used was this Hebrew sentence here, Yemloch Kemelech Shalosh Shanot. So if this is imperfect, we would translate this as he will reign 3 years, because it's just stating information as if it were fact. But what the jussive does is the jussive expresses will or desire with respect to a third party. So here, if this is expressing will or desire, then it would say, may he reign 3 years, or let him reign 3 years, or something like that. Very loosely, you could translate it into something like, I hope he reigns 3 years, or something. But that's probably a little too loose for first year Hebrew. So that's the difference in meaning. Is jussive is an expression of desire or volition. So when someone is expressing a desire or volition with respect to themselves, so may I reign for 3 years, like let me reign for 3 years, or something like that, or may I live to see 100, or something, those would be in the cohortative, because that wish is expressed toward the speaker. If it's expressed toward the addressee, that's when we use the imperative. And then when it's expressed to a third party, neither the speaker nor the addressee, that's when we use the jussive. So once this is posted, you'll be able to go back and look at that a little bit more detailed. All right, so number 4 here, we figured out this is imperative to MP to MS of Yeshav. Number 5, very similar situation. This is just halach, same thing. Halach often behaves as a one yod vav, and so here we've got a kal imperative to MS form of halach. Number 6, excuse me. Here we have nitana. Nitana. This one's very interesting. I'm wondering if there are more possibilities that we just haven't covered yet. There's a lot about this that kind of looks like a PL, but again, we haven't gotten to the PL. That's over here. So just what we've learned the kal in the perfect, imperfect, infinitive, imperative, and jussive and cohortative. So how do we make sense of this in that situation? If this is kal perfect, we're not going to have a hierarch under the first letter. That's just not going to happen. So kal perfect is out. What about kal imperfect? Well, kal imperfect would have a nun and a hierarch in the 1CP form. Now, we would then say tav looks like our R1 vowel, but tav has a dagesh. And it's preceded by a short vowel, which means this is a dagesh forte. This is a doubling dagesh, which is a good reason to think that we've got an assimilated nun here. So nun, tav, nun is natan. Kal imperfect explains everything here except for the comets hey. Without the comets hey, this would basically be a kal imperfect 1CP of natan. But the comets hey on the end makes this, instead of imperfect, it's cohortative now. It's expressing volition about the speaker rather than a fact about the speaker. So that means we've got a kal cohortative 1CP form of natan. Number 7 here, bakay. All right, this is that sere hey that I was talking about. In a third hey verb, when you get into the imperative, and I think the infinitive absolute, that third hey is going to be expressed as sere hey. So you might say this could either be an infinitive absolute or a count imperative 2ms of baka, but it can't be infinitive absolute, I don't think, because of the shava here. Infinitive absolute is usually going to have a full vowel. So that leaves us with the count imperative 2ms form of baka. Number 8, we've got, excuse me, we've got a da'a. Now here, we've got a pretty obvious olive prefix, which would indicate a 1cs, but this sere here looks like it belongs to a sere pattern. Of course, that second sere is reduced to make room for this kamate at the end. But we get that sere pattern in a one yod vav in the imperfect. So that would mean that our root is actually yada. Aleph and he are prefixes and suffixes of the cohortative. So we have a cow cohortative, 1cs form of yada. Number 9, we've got khu. Khu here is a little bit tricky because this actually comes from lakach. All right. Anytime you see a kof and a chet together in a verb, just start thinking of lakach as an option. Okay, because that's not going to be a frequent collocation, the kof and the chet. So lakach is probably in the mix somewhere. Now, we've lost the lamed because lakach often conjugates similar to either a one yod or a one nun. Here, like a one yod, it's lost its R1 letter. And we've got a shava and a shurik. And I said before, in these situations where we've basically got a form that could either be infinitive, construct, or imperative, if you get a shurik, that's no longer infinitive construct. A shurik will not show up on an infinitive construct, even as like as a pronoun suffix or something like that. So this tells us we have a cal imperative to MP.
You are currently the only person in this conference.
The shurik would be the 2MP form, would be indicative of the 2MP form. It's the 2MP suffix. So we have a cal imperative 2MP form of lakach. All right, and then finally number 10, we've got kitvi. Again, we've got that hirik shava. If we ask ourselves, why would we have a hirik in R1? Because obviously kaf, the only time it would be used as a prefix is if we're talking about the preposition kaf. So let's say that's the case. What if this is the preposition? What do we make of it? Well, then we've got tav and bait, and we're missing a third root letter. So either this is a third he, tava, or we're missing a middle one, which again we'll get to next week, or we're missing a yod or noon at the beginning. Well, it's not a noon because that would be assimilated into the tav. And it's not a yod either because if it were a yod, we would expect, I think we would still expect, well, let's say this. It can't be a one yod because if we have a kaf preposition on a one yod, that has to be an infinitive construct or a participle, I suppose. Neither of those are the case here. Our participle will not end in hirik yod, and an infinitive construct of a one yod is going to be a segel tav pattern, as we saw earlier. So yod does not work here. Noon does not work here. This kaf must be that first root letter. It must not be an added prefix, excuse me, which would, kind of hint at a missing root letter. So our root then is katav. So when do we get a hirik in R1 here? Well, we talked about before that happens in the PL stem, but we haven't gotten there yet, and this would have a dogish if it did. The only other time this is going to happen to a non-prefix letter is going to be when we have the shava at the beginning of a word, and that first shava becomes a hirik. So here, this has every sign of a prefix reduced or prefix eliminated imperfect family. Imperfect family with the prefix removed. In the infinitive construct, this could be ketov plus a hirik yod suffix. Now, as I say that, I don't think we've gotten to that point yet. Infinitive constructs. Yeah, we haven't put suffixes on infinitives yet, so that's not going to be it. Although I do think this probably could be an infinitive construct with a 1cs suffix. So basically, ketov would be to write, and then with the hirik yod suffix, this would either be to write me or me to write. But since we haven't gotten there yet, this is probably going to have to be imperative. So we've got a cal imperative. The hirik yod suffix is indicative of a 2fs imperative. And of course, our root is ketov. All right, let's see what else we've got here. A, B, C, and D, and then E and F. Okay. So B, translation. I mean, you've got these. Let me just see if I can point out stuff I want you to pay attention to. Again, Shava plus Holam. This is almost certainly going to be infinitive construct or imperative to MP. How do you tell the difference here? I mean, there's nothing about this that... Yeah, I think this could be either one. Number 2, you've got the noon prefix with the comet's hey suffix, so this is cohortative of karat. Excuse me, again. Number 3, anytime you have a yod hirik with two other yod hirik plus segel, that's a great indication of a jussive 3ms. Yod hirik plus segel is a jussive 3ms of a third hey verb. These consonants will shift depending on what the verb is. But if you've got yod hirik plus segel as the next vowel, that's going to be jussive. All right. So this would be may he build bana. Number 4, here we're negating this jussive. Ya'al, may he go up, becomes may he not go up. Shilhu, again, this is an indication of a shava beginning. So shalach in the imperative would be send, but this is masculine plural, so you all send. Div ki, again, hirik plus shava is a great indication of a shava. So this is going to be, this is a cal imperative 2fs. Hirik yod is 2fs here. Number 7, a rada. This is from yarad, he went down. Get the sere pattern. Of course, the second sere reduces to make room for the comet's hay. And then we've got a 1cs prefix with a comet's hay suffix, indicates cohortative. So may I go down. But the al says, may I not go down. Banu, this is going to be you all, comma, build. Tseu, this is going to be from yatsa, to come out. He came out. This is just going to be you all, comma, come out, or come forth. Laku, same thing, you all, comma, go. Ta'as, this is from asa. So we know that we've lost the hey, so this is going to be jussive. This is either going to be may she make or do with the tav, or it is possible that this tav indicates a 2ms. You do sometimes get the jussive in a second person form, where there it's indicating desire rather than command. Trying to think of what other possibilities. You know it's not imperative, because imperative would not have the prefix, and a third hey imperative would be sere hey. So this is going to be jussive. Now, if you want to say 3fs, that's fine. She do, or may she make, but it is possible this is 2ms with the jussive, which would be something like may you make, or may you do. All right, and then number 12, we're negating tavk, I guess. So what would this be? This is an inter. Oh, this would be from baka. That's why. Okay, so baka would be he wept. Here we've got the prefix, but we've still lost the hey. That indicates a jussive. So again, the tav prefix here, it is unusual that it's sere. Why would this be sere instead of, and why wouldn't it be tivek? This one is tricky for me. I guess because just unusual, just irregular. Let's see if there's a special explanation. Yeah. Okay, it's just irregular. It's not like there is a specific pattern or anything. It's just that in baka, this has a different sort of conjugation. So, jussive. Is there a difference between... Yeah, these... Okay, so again, I would say probably safer to side with 3fs. May she not weep? But this could be 2ms as well. There is a second person jussive. So instead of saying do not weep as imperative, the jussive would be something like may you not weep. It's a little bit, it's not as strong. All right, C. Let's look at number 3 here. So number 3, we've got... I'm caught by this dagish here. I'm trying to account for it. Basically, the only reason we have the dagish is a weak dagish because we've got a silent shavah right before it. So niz kara. This is from Zakar. He remembered. The noon hirik prefix and the compensate suffix indicate a 1 CP cohortative. So this would be may we remember whom? Remember et Adonai, remember the Lord, and avad is our root, not avad. The noon takes a patach prefix because it's going to match the patach, excuse me, the patach of the one guttural, and may we serve. So may we remember the Lord and may we serve him. Or let us remember the Lord and let us serve him. All right, D. Here we've got just a straightforward, strong, cow perfect, 2ms. Malach ta from malach. Number 2, we've got batach as our root, yod hirik prefix, shurik suffix. This is just a common cal imperfect, 3mp. Number 3, shilchi. Again, hirik plus shavah here is a good indication of shavah. So shalach, but in the imperative, 2fs indicated by the hirik yod. All right, number 4, we've got zo vahim. So this is from zavach, but the holum in R1 indicates a participle. Hirik yod mem indicates masculine plural. So this is a cal active participle, masculine plural of zavach. Number 5, we've got avod. This is an infinitive absolute, cal infinitive absolute of avad. Number 6, we've got lekachtem. So this is just a straightforward cal perfect 2MP form of lekach. Number 7, we've got tishma'u. So this is shema with a tavhiric prefix and a shuric suffix. That's a 2MP form of the cal imperfect of shema. Number 8, we've got shomeret. Shomeret is going to be, we've got the holum in R1. And, holum in R1, segel, segel, tav is going to be cal active participle feminine singular from shamar. Number 9, we've got a pretty straightforward nafal plus 1 CS, cal perfect suffix. Nafalti is going to be from nafal here, 1 CS. And then number 10, we've got tifkod. So this is pakad with a tavhiric prefix. So this is either cal imperfect 3FS of pakad or 2MS of pakad. All right, E. Let's look at number 5. So number 5, we've got de'u. De'u. This would be from yada. We've lost the yod. This is an imperative, because remember, if this were infinitive construct, we'd have the segel, segel, tav, and we would not have a shurik. So this is going to be an imperative. We've lost the yod because it's a 1 yod vav, and we've lost the prefix because it's an imperative, and so all we're left with is d and then the shurik suffix u. This is going to be a cal imperative 2MP form of yada. So this is basically, you all, sirs, know that, key is that, know that, we're going to negate this verb, teshvu. This is a sere pattern, so yashav. Of course, second sere has been reduced to make room for the shurik. So teshvu is going to be a tav prefix with a shurik suffix. This is a 2MP form of a cal imperfect. Know that you will not dwell upon the land forever, because you have avar is to pass over, to trespass, to go beyond. You have trespassed. Trespassed what? Et mitzvot Adonai. You have trespassed the commandment of the Lord and his statutes. Kukav is basically the plural form of kok, which is statute, and we've added the 3MS suffix here. All right, so know that you will not live upon the land forever, because you have transgressed or trespassed, you have passed beyond, transgressed the commandments, commandments of the Lord and his statutes. All right, and then F. Let's go ahead and take a look at Isaiah 2:5, I guess. All right. Make this a little bit bigger. All right, Beit Yaakov. All right, so Yaakov, you may not recognize. It's not a vocabulary word you've had before. But Yaakov, if you say that fast enough, Yaakov starts to sound like Yaakov, like Jacob. So Beit Yaakov, the house of Jacob. Jacob is definite because it's a proper noun. So the house of Jacob, Laku, so this again is halach with the imperative suffix to ms. So go, house of Jacob. So this is an address. I'm speaking to house of Jacob. Go and nelecha, the nelecha. My guess is this is halach with a 1CP cohortative. House of Jacob, go, and we will go in the light of Yahweh, I guess. House of Jacob, go. And we will go in the light of the Lord. Let's see what NASB translates that as. Oh, come, house of Jacob, and let us walk. Let us, okay. Yeah, that's right. The let us is the idea here. And let us come, house of Jacob, rather than go. I mean, yeah, it could, yeah. This works as come, I suppose. House of Jacob, come on, and let us walk in the light of the Lord. All right, good enough for me. If you guys have any questions or anything, don't hesitate to send them my way. As far as the midterm goes, if you've not started it yet, it's very, very heavy vocab. So there's a lot of questions, but that's because there's a lot of vocab. There's also going to be parsing, some grammar translations where you're translating phrases, and then actual translation sentences, like the full, 5 to 10 Hebrew word sentences. I think there's only about 5 of those. So I think you have 3 hours to do it. Don't wait until the last minute, because if you wait until 9 p.m. on Saturday night and then you have some sort of an issue at 9 p.m., I'm probably not going to be able to respond to an email or a text. So, take your time. Don't rush into the exam before you need to, but don't wait till the last minute either. So let me know if you have any questions. Otherwise, we'll see you next time. Have a great week.